Hi and welcome to the Red Lore Material Tracking Podcast. In this podcast, we are interviewing thought leaders in the field of material tracking. Each monthly episode focuses on a specific topic within the domain of the thought leader, who is interviewed by our CEO Nick van der Donk. Topics vary from automatic tracking of materials in the factory to tracking reusable containers across the supply chain, to guarding the chain of custody of sensitive goods, and much more. Here at Red Lore, these topics are at the heart of what we do, helping our customers boost their productivity. Let's dive right into this episode.
Welcome to the third episode of our podcast on materials tracking. Today, we'll be delving into the world of risk management in air cargo transport and how tracking can mitigate the risk. Our guest, Eric Allard, is a true expert on the topic of risk in the global air transportation industry. Eric has recently retired from a rich career in director, VP, and general manager roles at companies such as Kuehne+Nagel, Husky, Kinetsu World Express, DB Schenker, and DHL. Today, he continues to be on the boards of corporations. When it comes to claims, Eric has literally seen it all. He has agreed to join us today and talk about the challenges and solutions in risk management in air cargo transport. Welcome, Eric.
Thank you, Nick. Bonjour à tout le monde. Just a little hello from Montreal.
Eric, before we dive into the theme of the episode, risk management in air transport, could you define for us what the industry is that we're talking about?
Okay. When you're talking about your supply chain and your global transportation, there's usually four big pillars that you're looking at. You're looking at air, you're looking at ocean, you're looking at truck, and you're looking at rail. For today's conversation, I'm sharing my expertise, but mainly on the air cargo side of things. My experiences, my stories, my knowledge comes from that. Whatever is done in air cargo claims, it's the same process for air, rail, ocean, and trucks. So whatever we discuss can be applied at any modes of your global transportation requirements.
Okay, and I really look forward to hearing those stories. So we're going to talk about air primarily, you said. Are there particular types of goods that we're going to hone into, or are we talking just about any type of goods?
Well, usually in air, there's a common denominator, which is high value goods. So that's one of the things. But what we're going to, I think, focus on today is time sensitive, perishables. These are high value goods, pharmas, military, aviation parts. These are all critical parts to global transportations. And these have, again, the common denominator of high value goods and require some specific handling instructions and processes that are usually managed through people's quality assurance programs.
That's clear. And we're going to talk about risk. When we say risk, we usually think about bad things happening. Before going there, before exploring what those bad things could be, could you explain for us what does a typical process look like in this industry when everything goes well, when there's no damage?
You receive a PO from a customer, whatever products you sell or you distribute. Client gets it at the right place for the right price that was agreed, right condition, and you have a happy customer and you get a repeat order. Now, in a global strategy or a supply chain strategy, you have to manage your risk. So if your goods are high value or have partners in your supply chain that require specific processes to be followed, one needs to understand that in a global transportation or any transportation, there's a minimum of 8 steps within a shipment. So to complete an order, it's got to be handled in your facility. It's got to be put on a truck from your facility to your carrier's agent. From your carrier's agent, it gets handled again and it gets put on the main truck, ocean, vessel, a train, any modes of transportation. And now the same thing happens and it repeats itself in the reverse process when it's going close to the consignee. So in short, let me take an example. You get a package, you put it on your dock, there's handling there, there's handling to transfer the goods over to the trucking company, then you go to the handling or the main DC, then it gets handled again, and now it's on its way to the destination, so it goes on a truck to the final destination. It gets handled in a warehouse at final destination. It gets put on a truck to go to the final consignee. So now do you understand that There's a lot of risk in there. And that's what we're talking about today. How can you manage your risk?
Gotcha. And so now we understand the process in case everything goes well. Let's flip the coin now. Like in any business process, it goes right most of the time, but then suddenly something goes wrong. And we're assuming that we're not actively tracking things yet. We're going to delve into that later. So something goes wrong. Where have you seen that process that you outlined just before? Where have you seen that process go wrong? And can you give us some examples?
Sure. Two examples come to mind. I've handled a lot of live lobster in my life. And what you do not want to hear is, you, Nick, have ordered some live lobster from my farm in Nova Scotia, and you receive your lobster and it's dead. So there's a problem there. So you're going to say, hey, I opened the box and it was dead. That's the first time I handled it. I'm not to blame. What happens? So now there's a whole process of a claim process, or, we'll talk about that in a few minutes. But right now what happens is Nick is sitting on the other side, not receiving his live lobster, and his finger starts going, hey, who's to blame now? I know there was a snowstorm at destination. I think there's something happened, but now we need to look at the 8-step process and see the clear sign off from each handling person, each 8 player. What was their process? Because somewhere in that process, the lobster has left live and it has arrived dead at your destination. Or take another example, you're the Canadian government, you're importing vaccines during COVID, and you receive the vaccine only to open the boxes and to see all the gel packs are melted. The product is at room temperature and it's no good anymore. It needs to be refrigerated or whichever monitored. So that's what usually happens. There's an unhappy customer at the end, and he needs to discover where the problem has. No, it's not the consignee. Somebody in the partnership broke the link, and now we need to figure out what went wrong. And that's now the finger pointing. We do know that the consignee is the last and he's the destination. He's not at fault because he has now opened a claim and said, hey, my lobster is dead. So that's what usually happens.
Gotcha. And I'm going to delve into the finger pointing aspect of it to better understand that. But before going there, and since you mentioned the pharma industry, vaccines, could you give us an idea about the magnitude of the problem? If we talk about the claim, if we talk about risk management, what's the money side of things? How much money is at stake
So
here?
the money is as big as the people playing in the arena. So Eric Allard shipping something, it's not a huge magnitude. But again, let's go back to the example, if you allow me. Without naming names, I've handled a lot of pharma shipments in my life, and it's anywhere from $20,000 to $70,000. Let's put an average of $50,000 a skid of a pharmaceutical product. The average shipment from a DC to a DC from a global pharma could be anywhere from 8 skids to 20 skids. So again, let's go on the low side. So quick numbers, you take 8 skids at $40,000 or at $50,000 a skid. So that's $400,000 for one shipment that week. That company does 2 shipments every week. So now we're at $800,000 just in pure value. Do that times 52 weeks. We've now added up to $41 million in value. That's one customer, one traffic lane. These big global pharmas have numerous lanes going all over the world. So this could be times 10, times 12, times 2. But again, let's stick to our example, $41 million in total sales. So you're going to say, Eric, what's the impact? Each industry will have their claim ratio. If it's live lobster, it could be 2%. Pharma could be 1.5%. Military parts could be a little bit more expensive and there's more handling. They're more fragile. It could go up to 5. Claims ratios are from 2 to 5 depending on the industry. So let's go on the low end. Let's go back to the example I did. $41 million for one lane for one country at 2% is $832,000. For $832,000, now you got the attention of the CFO, you've got the attention of the management team. What can we do to prevent this? Because it is now accepted norm that we carry claims to 2 to 3%. So now look at the number. One lane, we're talking $800,000 that affects your bottom line right below EBITDA there. EBITDA numbers.
So that's $800,000 right there. And that's for one pharma player and that's for one shipping line. Is
Yep.
that the way I
Yeah.
have to
So now
understand this?
again, put your head in the pharma. He's got 100 clients. That's only one client. And we know pharmas deal with big numbers. So again, now if you're a
Okay.
manufacturing plant, you could easily expose yourself in the millions of dollars, and it's acceptable practice. So now, if we want to manage our risk and our supply strategy and contribute to the value of the company, managing this risk becomes very strategic.
That's pretty clear now. And as it's so strategic, and we're still assuming we're not actively tracking these goods, could you explain what happens exactly when there is a claim? So let's assume you have party A, and party A finds a reason to claim damage to party B. But these parties are probably committed to work with each other in the long term. So they don't want to sort of play it hard, go to court, fight each other. They want to find a solution. How do they go about today to resolve this solution in a way that satisfies the parties?
I've seen a lot of commercial consideration in my time, in my years of practice. What does that mean? It means that it's not always the party responsible that pays the claim. I want to keep my client happy. I'll make a deal. I'll cut a deal with somebody else because of lack of transparency. You could do great business with somebody until one claim happens and now you've broken the trust. So now what are you going to do? As you mentioned, are you going to play hardball and fight and finger point and say it's him and I'm going to win my point? At one point, you could risk a lot of volume for that $800,000 in the example that I had given before for the vaccines moving. So in consideration, it's not so big. So somebody accepts to take the blame. And it's not always the party that we think is paying the bill that is actually footing the charges at the end. So we need visibility. We need transparency. We need trust. Trust is not always sufficient. Trust is backed up by facts, like a lot of business. So how do we get certain facts? How do we manage our processes? How do we hold people accountable? I think there's technology in 2024, 2025 that allows us to look at that. And we talked about track and trace. I opened a parenthesis. Track and trace is offered by every Tom, Peter, and Daniel. They say, I offer a track and trace. No, they just say where the package is. I believe in today's world, our technology allows us to see what happens in each one of those steps. So this way we could easily pinpoint when there is a problem. If I could see what happened in each one of those 8 steps, I'll pinpoint the problem and I'll put a corrective action in place. And then we won't have any claims.
Right. Gotcha. So now that we've veered into the side of technology, the tracking side of things, and you've already mentioned track and trace, and then you say, well, really need the visibility in those different steps. Could you elaborate, help us understand how technology can do a better job at avoiding the finger pointing when there is damage, but still accurately identify where the problem is? Because like you said, there's commercial considerations and it's not always the party who caused the damage who actually eats the bill. And in the end, even if another party who's not responsible pays the bill, even then at the end of the day, this party also wants to be a profitable business. And I would assume that at some point it's the end customer who pays a higher price because of the, I think you said 2 to 5% losses. So even if it's accepted practice, it sounds like there's a big incentive to get rid of that. So back to the technology side now, how can technology and what kind of technology do we need to do a better job and allow us to identify exactly where the problem lies, where the goods spoil or get damaged?
So as I mentioned earlier, people say track and trace. Don't get fooled. Track and trace just physically tells you where the goods are. It doesn't tell you what happens. Is anybody that is familiar with the air cargo business, you've seen it on how it's made in Discovery. You see the UPS or the FedEx hubs, and what do you hear? 42 miles of conveyor belt. So it's good to know that your goods in Memphis, or it's good to know your goods are in Louisville, depending of your carrier. Their cargo hubs in there. Your goods could be handled up to 50 times by different people, and there's different milestones and processes So I take the example again of a big cargo hub operator, FedEx, and your product is going through their facility in Louisville. It could arrive in great condition and leave in there, be on the plane for destination, and be totally destroyed. So there is monitoring systems and monitoring capabilities out there that could tell you at each one of those steps what happened. What is it that's important for you, Mr. Customer? Is it a shock? Is it temperature? For what we've talked about earlier, the temperature controlled sensitive goods. Let's extrapolate. You have a live dog that is for you very precious, and you receive your dog at the other end and he's not well. Well, you want to know what happened in between. You need to know that, was it kept in the right condition? Was it kept at the right temperature? Was it kept at the right humidity level? Was it hit in transit? Was there a shock? Was there a vibration? So again, each industry from avionics will be more looking at shocks, perishables, time sensitive, medical, organs, animals. We need to know the temperature. We need to know the humidity level. And I'll give you an example. Your live lobster that goes through the facility at FedEx has to be handled at one point in a fridge. If there's a delay, it needs to be put in the freezer. So if I have a problem with my shipment, I'm going to go monitor and see, FedEx, did you put it in your fridge? I'm making it very simple in a complex world. Again, each supply chain is different, but FedEx in this case has the responsibility of holding your products in the freezer at the right temperature. So now FedEx tells me they do it. I think they did it, but my lobster's not good at destination. So I want to really see. So now I need the monitoring. I need the technology. And this is great because it provides visibility and enables deeper trust within your partners of the supply chain. We're not out there to finger point, Nick. We want to stop the finger pointing. We want true cooperations with our partners. We want true cooperations and visibility, which enables us to have a robust supply chain, robust partners that manage their process, and everybody could be held accountable. Accountability is done by facts. Monitoring provides us facts.
What I'm learning here is that you're saying that despite the existence of track and trace technologies that tell you where things are, that is not enough to create the visibility that in turn gives us that accountability, which is what we want. You're saying those technologies do not suffice. What we need is finer granularity, sensor level information. You mentioned shock, you mentioned temperature, you mentioned humidity. So fine grain sensor level information to create that visibility. That's a very useful message. Thank you for bringing that to this table. Let's take it one step further. Now we know what we have to do to create the visibility. Could you shed some light on the key requirements of a supply chain that makes it possible to add technology? Can we apply it just readily to any supply chain, or are there some prerequisites to enable that fine-grained tracking?
So I believe there are some common requirements to facilitate it. So the easy one, and if I'm a big pharma company and I'm shipping DC to DC, I have 5 DCs around the world that supply each one of the big geographies. But now my inventory is going from one place to another. So if I have a closed loop system, when I mean a closed loop system, go back to the 8 steps I talked about. Do you control those 8 steps? So I'll give an example. You're the pharma company. You have your warehouse. You can monitor in your warehouse. You have the same monitoring on your trucks. And now you need to talk to your partner, your carrier with who you're building and say, hey, we need to leverage our technology. You have some, I have some. We need to be able to talk. Fairly easily done. And on the destination now, it's my truck that's going to the airport, going to my DC. So it's easily connecting. Today, technology is there. So that's an easy one when you control and you're doing intra-company shipments. But it is critical because in that case, in between company transfers of inventory, if there is a claim, it's the same company that bites the bullet. So again, let's take the example of the $41 million worth of business. That's $800,000. Pharma in Belgium or pharma in Canada, one of them is going to absorb at the end of the year an $800,000 claim. So between the two plant managers, you know what? We've got a closed loop. Let's talk to the technology and let's close the 8 steps. So this way we could all monitor. Everybody has visibility and everybody could ensure that, yes, if there is a problem on one truck at destination, it'll become evident. We're going to fix that problem. Claims are going to be stopped. In the long run, we all gain. What does that also do is it builds value for everybody and all the partners in.
Yeah. So you gave the example of an intra-company shipment where one branch of the company ships it to another location, to another branch of the company. Well, let's talk about how to make this work in multi-party, multi-company, multi-organization supply chains, organizations or companies that are independent from one another and only have that commercial relationship. And we're still very much at the beginning of sensor technology deployment in these industries. What do you think these independent parties need to do to stimulate the adoption of technology?
I was a carrier at one point, so I would like to be ahead of my competition and provide value add services. So as a carrier, I would be really looking into deepening my track and trace with offering monitoring and talking to technology. So this way it shows that, hey, I'm opening my business process. I'm confident that my business process works. Now, a lot of times the volumes are between the same partners. Both have interest in filing the claim. So I think a tri-party discussion could secure long-term processes. And with what's going on in the economy, what are we all hearing today? Supply chain brace, supply chain here. Build a robust supply chain. Talk to your carriers, talk to your consignee, and if all 3 parties are interested about monitoring the temperature, the humidity, if it's been shocked, where it is and at the exact time to pinpoint a location and the height in a warehouse, for example, it's going to be important for all 3 parties. So basically being able to sit down, to communicate, to look at the right technology, and everybody has quality assurance programs. This is how you can manage it. Partners want to talk. Because you built the trust, it's hard to build a supply chain. So anything that you can do to enable it, to provide trust, to provide visibility, to provide information, and to avoid the finger pointing and commercial consideration. As we said, it's not always the person responsible that pays for it. Monitoring will allow people to take on their own responsibilities and be accountable for their processes. That's where I think monitoring goes. It's not about finger pointing. Being a responsible party to everybody in the supply chain.
Right. And of all those parties involved, is there one party or one type of party you think is better placed to kick off the sensor technology revolution? A party that's better placed than the other parties in the chain?
I believe the carriers or the big 3PLs. So the big, you mentioned it, I worked for them, the Kuhns, the DHLs, and all of those. They're starting to dab in it. They understand they have a cold chain logistics team. So now they've divided their business and conquered. And I think they're growing by leaps and bounds in the pharma and the avionics because they're starting to look at technologies like this. But to answer your question, I think the carrier is in the best position because we need the carrier. He's the missing link right now to allow me to talk to my client and avoid the finger pointing in the case of a claim. So the carrier is the one, and then that entices that level of business to work with that carrier. Now he could go and demonstrate to other customers in pharma and say, look what I'm doing for this guy. And it is robust, and we've reduced the amount of claims, and we've identified the problem. When you're shipping in Asia, in typhoon season, we know that there's temperature controlling issues at the airport because your goods are sitting on the tarmac. So I could work with my carrier and say, dear Mr. Carrier, the last 3 times you've missed the flight and you left the container outside. That's where the supply chain is broken. Carrier's going to fix it.
It's really helpful. And that brings us to the end of this podcast. Thank you, Eric. This was awesome. Thanks for helping us understand the complex world of claims management and risk management in air cargo transport and how tracking technology can provide tremendous value. It's amazing to hear that you have so many refreshing ideas on how the industry can improve. And I hope you'll continue to influence this industry and make it better. Thank you very
Thank
much.
you for inviting me, and I wish you guys all the best of success, and keep doing what you're doing. It's required out there.
Dear listener, this is the end of this episode. As always, we welcome your comments. Feel free to post them within the platform you're using for this podcast, or drop us a note at info@redlore.com. Stay tuned for the next episode coming out next month. We'll be talking about real-time location systems, or RTLS in general, which is the technology underlying everything we've been talking about in our podcasts and everything we do here at Redlore. Our guest will be Jana Kilpua, an expert, researcher, and consultant on the topic of real-time location systems. He'll be discussing the technology side as well as the business benefits of RTLS and what to look for if you're considering deploying an RTLS system in your organization. Thank you, and see you next time.
We hope you liked this episode. If you like the podcast content we're bringing, don't forget to subscribe and hit the like button. At Redlore, we help manufacturing and logistics companies address visibility issues within their material flows and manufacturing processes. Our wireless tags accurately monitor the on-site location of materials as well as their condition, such as temperature deviations and damage. Our solution also tracks the material carries such as totes and racks within the manufacturing site and across sites. It replaces time-consuming and error-prone barcode scanning. It brings you real-time location and condition monitoring, which an older technology like RFID cannot do. The end result is that our solution helps our customers avoid line stops, inventory discrepancies, inefficiencies due to human error, and keeps track of the chain of custody. If you'd like to hear more about the topic addressed in this, or in previous episodes, just send us an email at info@redlore.com and we'll be in touch. We also love your feedback, so drop us a note with your thoughts.